The Fox's video about a 40Hz refresh rate on the Steam Deck sent me down a rabbit hole of what could possibly be in store for the Steam Deck. In this latest news roundup, I go over that, an update on sales, and a lot more. Let's get into it. What's good, Deck Gang? First of all, shout out to DBrand. That's not an ad, I just really like the new Teardown skin and thought it fit the theme of this video, with the Steam Deck always receiving improvements and, in a sense, always being a work in progress. Even though, yeah, it's great already. But hey DBrand, if you do want to sponsor this channel, call me. So anyway, in order to look at the future of Steam Deck, we must first look at the past of Fan to Deck, previously on Fan to Deck. Looks like a lot of those rough edges are getting rounded off, and something in one of the recent updates has prompted the Fox to say that, quote, the last update for Steam Deck was Megaton, end quote. So we have some stuff to look forward to for sure. So yeah, I said that back in a pre-launch video from February. This Megaton feature got postponed, still hasn't made it to SteamOS, and ever since then I'd been wondering what this feature was, and I wouldn't have guessed that it was refresh rate switching. That's what the Fox revealed to us in his latest Steam Deck video, where he demos this feature on a Steam Deck with Windows. Before we continue, guys, make sure to hit the like button since that helps this video spread to more people. I've had a few people ask me what I'm going to do when the Steam Deck news cycle dries up. I have a bunch of ideas, so subscribe, set your notifications to all, so that when I do publish a new video, you can tell me if you like that direction or if you prefer something else. Oh, and check out my Patreon if you want to feed me ideas. I'm trying to get to 20 patrons, so give it a look. Alright, back to refresh rate switching. What does that mean for the Steam Deck? As you know, the Steam Deck display is a 60Hz native display, and you may also already know that you are able to sometimes change the refresh rate of your own monitor from within the operating system of your own PC. For example, I can go from 144Hz to 60Hz on my desktop monitor. Well, apparently Valve has been working on a feature that would allow arbitrary FPS limiting. Right now, the options for FPS limits are either 15, 30, 60, or unlimited, but Valve would like you to be able to set whatever value you desire in the quick access menu. There were actually leaks of this prior to the launch of the Steam Deck. Here you can see that the frame limiter is a slider as opposed to a few preset options. In any case, according to Plagman, they have been working on this feature, but they want to continue to deliver smooth frame pacing. Here's exactly what he said in this tweet, quote, "We've been really excited to bring refresh rate switching to the deck to deliver smooth frame pacing in arbitrary FPS limit scenarios, but the current screen blanking time when switching is a bit much. We've been doing work behind the scenes to improve it, coming soon." End quote. In other words, in order to be able to bring a smooth arbitrary FPS limiting, they're working on refresh rate switching to accommodate that, just like the Fox demoed on Windows. That's awesome, and I'm glad to hear it's still in the works and will be coming soon. The reason this is great is because, as the Fox describes, this is the best of both worlds. It's having your cake and eating it too. That is, you get a significant bump in frame rate from 30 to 40, you continue to have smooth frame pacing, and your power usage is still significantly reduced compared to running a game at 60 FPS. While 30 to 40 may not sound like a big bump, you could argue that it's more important than the jump from 40 to 60. Either way, what Valve is setting up is for you to have your way and for you to set whatever frame limit that your heart desires so that you can balance performance and power on your own. That does seem like it increases the need for per game performance profiles, but I don't see any indication that Valve has plans for something like that. Hopefully we'll hear about that soon. That video from the Fox was fresh on the heels of this video from Digital Foundry. In DF's video, they test ray tracing on the Steam Deck, and just like refresh rate switching, they were only able to test it in Windows. It held up very well, and Digital Foundry were impressed. So between these two teases, that got me to thinking, what else might only be available in Windows right now, and could it work on the Steam Deck? Could that tell us what the future holds for Steam Deck features? Well, there's not a lot more I could think of, but there are two potentially interesting ones that would be helpful for docked gaming. One of them is HDR. While the Steam Deck's display does not support HDR, it would be nice to enable HDR when connected to a compatible display. This is impossible on SteamOS right now because Linux itself does not have HDR support. Back in September, one distro developer, Red Hat, was recruiting for software engineers that could help implement HDR in Linux. Thanks to free and open source software and needing to update the upstream kernel that SteamOS itself uses, the Steam Deck could benefit from such an update. Once implemented, Valve could even incorporate it into the quick access menu and add a toggle. That's pure speculation, but it would be an easy win for Valve if HDR becomes available at the kernel level. The second feature that would be helpful in docked gaming is AMD's Anti-Lag. So here's the thing, FPS limiting does a great job of reducing input lag, but what if, just like with switching the refresh rate, you wanted to have your cake and eat it too? What if you want to make input lag as low as possible while still delivering as many frames as possible, especially if you're plugged in and don't care about your power budget? That's what AMD's Anti-Lag and Nvidia's Reflex features advertise, that you can play competitive games with unlimited frame rates while still keeping your input lag as low as possible. Well, it turns out once again you can enable anti-lag on Steam Deck and Windows. Like refresh rate switching, it takes a few extra steps beyond just installing Windows on Steam Deck, but someone on Twitter got it working. I can't pronounce this person's handle, but I'll try my best. I think it's the SM Celria. In any case, they managed to get AMD's Adrenalin UI working on Steam Deck. The default GPU drivers do not do this. From here, they can enable certain features like FreeSync or, as I was alluding to, AMD's Anti-Lag. They only post a screenshot so we don't get to see it in action, and I haven't tested this myself yet. I asked the Fox, he's tested this, but said that the Anti-Lag wasn't adding much, so perhaps this is moot. But could this feature come to SteamOS? Well, it's a bit tricky. While AMD has added support for anti-lag in DX12, there's still no support for Vulkan or OpenGL as far as I know. So once again, there would need to be upstream updates to get this working properly, but it's possible and it's something that Valve could help push. The question then becomes, is there enough motivation to implement features like these? Why would people want these features when they're typically playing Steam Deck in handheld mode? Well, that brings me to my next update. We're coming up on the time that Valve has said that they would start shipping official Steam Deck docks. There's always a chance that it can get delayed, but Valve has been aiming for late spring. Assuming they mean American spring and not Kiwi spring, we have 2 months left in the season. Consequently, Valve recently updated the specs of the dock on the official Steam Deck page. Previously, there was only one USB 3.1 port and two USB 2.0, but they have since updated them all to be USB 3.1. They also clarified that the Ethernet port is gigabit, and while many of us speculated that that would be the case, it was never made clear. With this small update to the dock specs, as well as the fact that Valve have returned to being somewhat radio silent, I think they're working behind the scenes on big software updates that target docked gaming. I don't know exactly what will be in there, we only know for sure that they're working on an arbitrary FPS limit. But there are multiple possibilities outside of that. I know how much you all want performance profiles. I'd bet ray tracing is coming, and I would also like to have some quality of life docking features like the ability to set my own resolution in gaming mode. I'm hoping we see more info in the coming weeks and months, but at least we know Valve are working on it. One thing we know Valve are not working on, however, is Portal 3. As we were leading up to the launch of the Steam Deck, there were a lot of Portal universe hints, and rumors of Portal 3 were abundant. Instead, all those rumors culminated with the announcement of Portal 1 and 2 coming to Switch and the release of Aperture Desk Job. Desk Job was fun, but it dashed any remaining hope I had for Portal 3. Well, if you still had hope for Portal 3, I think Eric Wolpol's most recent comments are sadly going to shut that down. Eric Wolpol is known for his writing on Psychonauts, several Half-Life games, and both Portal games. In an interview with the Kiwi Talks podcast, he says this.
Oh yeah, I would love to. Yeah, I'd work on another Portal in a second, but I can't do it unfortunately by myself. So, but yeah, we gotta start Portal 3. That's my message to
let's make it happen.
To whoever. If you anything you can do, let's do it. Let's just make
Dave,
it. Make
if
it
you're
happen.
listening.
Because yeah, I am also not getting any younger. Like we are reaching the point where it's crazy to think literally going to be too old to work on Portal 3. So we should just do it. And Desk Job is fun. If you like Desk Job, send mail to Gabe. Tell him you want some Portal 3.
Alright, Deck Gang, you know what to do. Everyone email Gaben at Valve Software, tell him Fan to Deck Paul sent you and that you want Portal 3. And why is it always the writers at Valve advocating for the sequels that Valve refuses to greenlight? This reminds me of another famed Valve writer, Mark Laidlaw, who basically leaked the plot to Half-Life 2 Episode 3. I mean, technically it was a short story that he titled Epistle 3, starring a protagonist named Gertie Fremont, but yeah, you know. So yeah, I don't think I've ever mobilized my viewer base to do one specific thing, but if you all email Gabe and tell him to greenlight Portal 3, we might actually get somewhere. The next bit of news I have for you is an update on the sales story I brought to you last week. And my Steam Deck is not a flop video. I got a lot of comments that really showed the anxiety of how slowly Valve seems to be moving through the queue. And when I say moving through the queue, I'm referring to the queue of reservations. So as of right now, for US 512 models, I believe Valve has made it through about the first 15-16 minutes of reservations. I don't have the exact number, but I believe someone out there does have a fresh number. If you do, please put it in the comments and I'll pin it. But someone on Reddit shared something to show that not all minutes in the queue are created equal. So this graph comes from Usual District 2052 on the Steam Deck subreddit. This is compiled based on a survey that was unofficially shared on the subreddit and other Steam Deck communities. So it's not a full dataset, but it seems to be a representative sample. In any case, I think a few things are immediately clear here. First is that 512 was the most popular option by a large margin. It's not even close. But second here is that some minutes got more orders than other minutes. You see the biggest spikes in minute 13 followed by minute 7. So we recently passed the biggest spike. There are still 2 spikes ahead in minute 18 and minute 25, but they're 30% smaller than the one we just passed. So even if Valve maintains the current throughput, we should theoretically start getting through the queue a little faster. And here's something else to keep a lookout for. Thanks to commenter Use Free Speech for pointing this out. If you look at the Steam hardware survey for March and limit it to only Linux users, take a look at 2 things. First is the video card description. You'll see that users with an AMD Van Gogh were not charting last month, but now they have a full 0.5%. Alright, now check primary display resolution. From February to March, the 800 by 1280 resolution also gained about 0.5%. It appears we are now seeing Steam Deck data show up in the hardware survey, which is awesome. I'd caution a bit against trying to extrapolate sales data, but it would be good to see how fast Steam Deck is growing from month to month. And finally, it's time to add these to your wish list, the segment where I recommend newly released and verified games for the Steam Deck. Today's feature is the Eternal Castle Remastered, and that's because I am so excited to share this childhood favorite with you. That's why I have 4 keys to this game on screen. Do you all remember this 1987 gem, the cinematic platformer with the 2-bit CGA graphics? No? You don't know what I'm talking about? That's because it didn't happen. I kind of love that the developers of this game went with this sort of Mandela effect marketing. It claims to be remastering of the original Eternal Castle game from 1987, but that game doesn't exist. Nonetheless, it borrows the nostalgia of games like Prince of Persia, Another World, and Flashback while implementing the modern design of games like Inside and Limbo. This is a cinematic platformer through and through, with a weird, vague plot and gorgeous 2-bit visuals. It uses the constraint of a 4-color palette to create gorgeous landscapes that weave you through the mysterious lore of a post-apocalyptic future as you explore the remnants of its past. This constant tug of war between future and past sits at the heart of the Eternal Castle. And that's why I'm recommending you add it to your wishlist or pick it up. It got verified by Valve a few weeks ago, and it's a true gem. Has Turbo Overkill got the pitch for you? You play as the double-jumping, double-dashing, wall-running, chainsaw-sliding robot Johnny Turbo. This fast-paced game is sliding into early access with a full first episode, and it's expected to be in early access until early next year. This game is really fun so far. I played a bit of the demo during the Steam Next Fest, but I didn't get a chance to try it on Steam Deck. Now that I have, I can say that there's a lot going on, and I'm actually pretty bad at the game so far, but I'm feeling the urge to try to use all the different mechanics. There's this lock-on alt-fire on the dual pistols that remind me of on-rail shooters like Panzer Dragoon and Sin and Punishment. The arsenal in general is wicked, and each of the weapons has a useful secondary fire like the grenade launcher on the shotgun and the flamethrower on the chain gun. There are collectible tech chips and cassette tapes in each level, and I love that even though I don't think they serve any purpose beyond providing a change of pace from the push-forward style of gameplay. This is yet to be evaluated for deck compatibility, but I would call it playable. There are movies that won't play, including short tutorial movies. Also, the default controls are missing a slide button, so you have to map that yourself. Still, the game is worth the little bit of effort that it takes to get running. Check it out. The Iron Oath is a new turn-based tactical RPG that came into early access this week. Right off the bat, the pixel art and music are excellently crafted. Some consider this game to be a little content shy in its current state, but I would point out the depth in the Iron Oath. The world evolves dynamically in a way that can make multiple playthroughs unique. There are multiple difficulty levels and your party members may die or otherwise retire. That depth is visible at the micro level of the game as well. The hex-based combat can be complex but satisfying. The classes of your party members should be picked to complement each other. The maps have hazards and party members can set their own hazards. From a compatibility standpoint, this would once again be playable and not deck verified. Just like Turbo Overkill, tutorial movies are not watchable. Also, there are no controller glyphs and the font size is somewhat small, though still readable. Alright, that's going to do it for today's episode. Shout out to all of you and shout out to my patrons who support me and continue to give me ideas on where to take this channel. If you want to help support Fan the Deck, check out my Patreon page. Deck Gang out. Goodbye!